everyone, welcome to another Classic Movie Monday, and today I thought it would be interesting to briefly address the film E.T., short for Extraterrestrial. The interesting thing about E.T. is that it's had, I think, a fairly influential approach to or as at least had an influential approach in filmmaking and films in general. And I think a large part of it has to do with the fact that although you could argue that E.T. is rather formulaic, the way that it executes that formula actually is probably one of the only films that I think that has done it significantly well. When you look at the hiding a pet scenario kind of approach, I guess you could say Lilo and Stitch is sort of similar, but again, there's a lot of different aspects that occur in Lilo and Stitch that are really not presented in E.T. So, although there could be similar aspects to both E.T. and other children's films, I think E.T. offers something unique when addressing this kind of formula, as opposed to, I think, a lot of other films that have come out that tried to sort of bring about this idea of children associating with things that are supposed to not really be, I guess, discovered or keep secrets, supposedly. In case if there are some people who do not know what E.T. is about, basically E.T. revolves around the story of Elliot, Michael, and Gertie. And these three children are siblings, and they happen to come across, in particular Elliot, an alien or an extraterrestrial, and they call him E.T. And since he's an alien, this creeps them out. At the same time, they're very fascinated by him, and so they sort of keep him as kind of a pet. But at the same time, they don't tell anybody about him or alert any authority figure about him. They just keep him under wraps. That's kind of the sort of formulaicness that I guess people would associate with E.T. But I think the reason why this formula is rather different is because even though it has formulaic elements, it takes a different approach than I think a lot of other films. Instead of, I think, really focusing in on family, which is usually what these kinds of films try to do. You know, the pet comes in and then it brings the family somehow close together. I really don't see that within E.T., because within E.T. it largely is a part of Elliot bonding with the alien, and not necessarily about him rekindling anything with the family necessarily. Largely it's about just this relationship they have, this childlike wonder and excitement that they share together. That's really at the heart of the film. As opposed to a lot of other films where generally the creature is used sort of as a plot device to bring people together. You'll see this in films like Free Willy. You'll see this in films like Lilo and Stitch. Again, it's all about that bringing back together of a family and trying to bring in some kind of bond, and a stable bond that maybe did not exist had this creature not come into the family. But really, E.T. does not focus on that idea. It focuses largely just on the relationship between the two, Elliot and the extraterrestrial. It's not about using the extraterrestrial as a plot device. And I think that's really what makes E.T. unique. And also at times fairly like artistic. You can kind of see the, I guess, you know, I guess wonder-like bits that are, I guess, sort of present in films too, like WALL-E, where, you know, E.T. is, you know, when he's watching the television and he sees this couple kissing, and it's something that he's never seen before, and it kind of captivates him. And then at the same time, Elliot, you know, who has the crush on the girl at the school, you know, it's just, there's no words, there's no dialogue in those moments, but there is so much, there's so much emotion within those bits and scenes where it's kind of going back and forth into what E.T. is seeing and what Elliot is experiencing. And those kinds of things are really what I think hold this kind of a film together, because it's largely based upon emotion and not upon really rationale or on trying to create complex plot. It's largely based upon the characters and on the relationships between the characters and the emotional experiences that they have, both together and also on an individual level. And I think that's something that E.T. really did focus on, and I think did a really good job, and I think it's why it sort of stands out as one of those films that I think executes the formula in a very different way than what a lot of other films do. The formulaic elements are there, but that's not what the heart of the film is about. And that's why I think E.T. really succeeds. Now, there are some people who will say that E.T. is overrated. And I think the biggest one that I've heard about is the sentimentality. It's sort of similar to Forrest Gump, where I hear that same argument of, oh, it's too sentimental, oh, it's trying to manipulate our emotions, and blah, 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 blah. I don't think that's true, because I think that in large part what the film tries to do is to create very powerful emotional responses. And sometimes these people may not necessarily associate with such a big, heavy response. And I think a lot of 80s movies tended to do this, where there would be a really overemphasis on maybe emotional situations. The one scene where Elliot and E.T. are sort of being, you know, separated, and just sort of showcases that emotional connection that they have for one another. And again, they develop this throughout the entire film. And so when that moment happens, although it's a little bit overdramatic and it's a little bit over the top, I still think it comes off effectively because of what the film set up throughout. By focusing on these characters and focusing on trying to create this story and this environment for the extraterrestrial and for Elliot to really bond. Now, I can agree with the idea that sometimes there can be points where the film tries to be maybe too touchy-feely, but I feel like that's, despite those little tidbits and moments, it still holds up, because I think really it does bring light to this idea of friendship and of this idea of two beings who have really nothing in common sort of coming together and forming a friendship. That's really the heart of the film and what the film really focuses on. It's really not designed, I think, to be anything more in-depthly complex than that. And again, I think it just has a similar sort of simplicity to what WALL-E does with trying to be a little bit more emotionally based, maybe a little bit more visually based. You know, and again, a lot of that has to do with the way Spielberg sets up the film with the music and the atmosphere, and you know, that's really what I think gets people invested into the film, because you really do feel the emotional weight of the characters because of all of these enhancements that give the film substance, and that's, I think, truly what the film tries to showcase. And again, it's not a very deep, complex, you know, complicated piece. It's not designed to be a crime drama. It's not designed to be some deep political intrigue. It's just a film about this unlikely friendship and unlikely circumstances that come with that friendship, and ultimately what ends up resulting from that. And it's not about family. It's not about trying to create, this, you know, it's not trying to do what a lot of other kids' films do. It's just about the relationship. That's it. And I think that's something that's very rare that we see within kids' films, at least now today, where kids' films largely try to focus in on family and family issues and trying to have family issues resolved with some kind of big, you know, dramatic climax. But here it's really just about it's about two unlikely people in unlikely circumstances, but at the same time form a bond that ends up staying with them for the rest of their existence, probably. And that's just something that I think sticks with people, and I think that's why people, I think in particular, identified with E.T. I think that's why a lot of kids even identified with E.T. And I kind of like too how, you know, since E.T. was coming from the 80s, like it's not completely like PC like some other kids stuff is nowadays. So it's kind of nice to see that that present in E.T., especially with like language too. Like some people, some of what the characters say, especially like Michael, it's very teen oriented and not necessarily kid oriented, but it's what another or younger kid would probably be surrounded with. So that's why I think it has that relatable atmosphere, and they do seem to still have that same similar family dynamic with the siblings, like that you would see. But I like how it's definitely not the focus. It's definitely not the heart of the film. It's about how E.T. impacts their lives individually, not them as a group or as a family. And I think that's really what makes this film stand out, and I think what makes this film very unique from a lot of the other films that we've seen that have tried to insert this formula, that have tried to put this idea of putting in an animal or putting in some kind of being in there in order to resolve family issues as a plot device. And that's I think something that's been used and overdone, but E.T. definitely takes a different approach with this, and I think that's something that definitely should be worth considering, and that's why I would consider this to be a classic among children's films or children's sci-fi oriented films. The interesting thing too is that E.T. is actually a lot easier to follow as opposed to something like Star Wars, where you have like maybe complicated political dynamics. And again, it really just breaks down to the simple core of childlike wonder, and the bonds between two unlikely living things. and bringing them together and having that bond impact them on an individual level. So that's all I think I can really say about E.T. without giving really anything away as to what really happens as Elliot, the main character, goes through bonding with E.T. while at the same time trying to hide him from potential threats. So again, that's really the I think important thing to understand is that it doesn't do the relationship, I think, a disservice. And I'm not saying that that inserting this formula into other films doesn't work. Like, for example, in Lilo and Stitch, they do it really well, but I think E.T. just does it uniquely. And that's why I think it holds itself as being a classic. But ultimately, I think that's, again, really all I can say. But if there are any questions, comments, concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a great day, week, month, and year. And I hope to see you all in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.